Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Horizon, watching the stars through the large front window. His ship had been traveling through space for 3 months now, looking for new worlds and life forms. The crew was getting tired, and Jake could see it in their faces. They all wanted to find something interesting, something that would make this long trip worth it. "Captain, we're getting something strange on the sensors," called out Lisa Grant from her position at the communications desk. Her voice had an edge of excitement that made everyone on the bridge turn to look at her. "What kind of strange?" Jake asked, walking over to her station. Lisa was one of his best officers, and she didn't get excited about nothing. "There's a ship out there, sir, about 2 million miles away, but it's not like anything in our databases." Lisa's fingers moved quickly over her controls, bringing up the sensor readings on the main screen. Jake stared at the image that appeared. The ship was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was curved and flowing, like it had grown instead of being built. Strange lights pulsed along its surface in patterns that looked almost like a heartbeat. The whole thing seemed to glow with a soft, blue-green light. "Dr. Hayes, what do you make of this?" Jake called to his science officer. Dr. Peter Hayes was already running scans from his station. His face showed confusion as he read the results. "Captain, this is impossible. The ship appears to be partly organic. The hull is reading as some kind of living tissue, but it's also showing metallic properties, and the energy signature is off the charts." "Is it dangerous?" asked Tony Rodriguez, the ship's security chief. His hand was already moving toward his weapon controls. "I don't know," Dr. Hayes admitted. "The readings don't make sense. It's like the ship exists in more than 3 dimensions." Jake studied the alien vessel on the screen. It was beautiful in a way that made him feel strange inside. The pulsing light seemed to call to him somehow. "Lisa, try to make contact. Standard first contact protocols." Lisa nodded and began transmitting on all frequencies. "Unknown vessel. This is the UES Horizon of the Earth United Space Command. Please respond." For several minutes there was only silence. Then the speakers crackled to life with a sound that made everyone on the bridge freeze. It was a voice, but unlike any they had heard before. It was musical, like singing and talking at the same time. But what shocked them most was that it spoke perfect English. "Greetings, humans of the vessel Horizon. I am called Lyra. I have been waiting for you." Jake felt his heart skip a beat. The voice was beautiful, sad, and somehow very old. "Waiting. For us? How do you know our language?" "I've been watching your species for some time, Captain Morrison. You interest me greatly. Your people have such potential, such capacity for growth and understanding." "How do you know my name?" Jake asked, though he wasn't really surprised anymore. This being seemed to know things that should be impossible. "I know many things, Captain. But right now, I need your help. My ship has been damaged and I am alone. May I come aboard your vessel?" Tony Rodriguez stepped forward quickly. "Captain, this could be a trap. We don't know anything about this being or its intentions." Jake looked at the alien ship on the screen. Something about it, about the voice, made him want to trust this Lyra. "What kind of damage? Can we see you?" "Of course, Captain. I will show myself to you." The main screen changed, and suddenly they were looking at the most beautiful being any of them had ever seen. She appeared human-like, but perfect in every way. Her skin seemed to glow with an inner light, and her features were so lovely they almost hurt to look at. Her hair moved as if underwater, and her eyes held depths that seemed to go on forever. Lisa gasped softly, and Jake heard similar sounds from other crew members. Even Tony, always the professional soldier, stared with his mouth slightly open. "I know my appearance may seem strange to you," Lyra said, her image smiling sadly. "I hope it does not frighten you." "Frighten us?" Jake managed to say. "You're the most beautiful being I've ever seen." Something flickered across Lyra's face, an expression Jake couldn't read. "You are kind, Captain Morrison. But beauty can be deceiving. May I come aboard? I promise I mean no harm to you or your crew." Jake looked around the bridge. His crew was still staring at the screen, clearly enchanted by what they saw. Tony looked worried, but even he seemed affected by Lyra's presence. What kind of help do you need? Jake asked. My ship's power systems are failing. I have been drifting for many days now. Soon I will have no life support left. I need only temporary shelter while repairs are made. Dr. Hayes spoke up from his station. Captain, her ship's energy readings are definitely dropping. Whatever's wrong, it's getting worse. Jake made his decision. Very well, Lyra. We'll beam you aboard, but you'll understand if we take precautions. Of course, Captain. I would expect nothing less from a careful leader. Jake turned to Tony. Have a security team meet us in transporter, room 1. But keep weapons lowered unless there's a direct threat. Yes, sir, Tony replied, though he still looked unhappy about the situation. As they walked to the transporter room, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that this meeting would change everything. There was something about Lyra, something in her voice, and in those ancient-looking eyes that spoke of secrets and knowledge beyond human understanding. When they reached the transporter room, the security team was already in position. The transporter operator, Kyle Brooks, looked nervous as he worked his controls. She's ready to beam over, Captain, Kyle reported. Do it, Jake ordered. The transporter hummed to life, and sparkles of light began to form on the platform. Slowly, the light took shape and Lyra appeared before them. In person, she was even more stunning than on the screen. She stood gracefully, her glowing skin casting soft light around the room. When she looked at Jake, he felt as if she could see straight into his soul. Thank you, Captain Morrison, she said, her musical voice filling the room. You have no idea how long it has been since I have had company. Jake stepped forward, extending his hand in greeting. Welcome aboard the Horizon, Lyra. When she took his hand, her touch was warm and somehow comforting. But Jake noticed something else. For just a moment, he thought he saw her perfect features, flicker like a bad hologram. But when he looked again, she was as beautiful as before. 3 days had passed since Lyra came aboard the Horizon. The crew was still getting used to having her on the ship. Every time she walked down a hallway, people would stop and stare. Her beauty was unlike anything they had ever seen. But there was something else about her that drew them in. She seemed to carry wisdom that was older than anything human. Captain Jake Morrison found himself spending more time than usual on different parts of the ship, always somehow ending up wherever Lyra was working. He told himself it was just to check on their guest, but deep down, he knew there was more to it. Lyra had been given quarters on Deck 7, but she rarely stayed there. She spent most of her time in different areas of the ship, learning about human technology and culture. The crew was amazed at how quickly she understood things that took humans years to learn. She's incredible, said Amy Chen, the ship's counselor, as she sat with Jake in the mess hall. I've been talking with her about human art and music. The things she says make me think about life in ways I never have before. Jake nodded, taking a bite of his food. What kinds of things? Well, yesterday we were looking at some paintings on the wall display. She said that humans put their souls into their art in a way that most species don't. She said we paint our emotions, not just what we see. Amy paused, stirring her coffee. Then she said something strange. She said that most beings in the galaxy create things to hide their true nature, but humans create things to show who they really are. That is strange, Jake agreed. Did she say anything about her own people? Amy shook her head. Every time I try to ask about her past or her species, she changes the subject. It's like she doesn't want to talk about where she comes from. Across the ship in engineering, Kyle Brooks was having his own interesting conversations with Lyra. She had asked to see her ship's repair progress, and Kyle was happy to show her the work. I have to admit I don't understand how your ship works, Kyle said as they stood looking at the alien vessel through the cargo bay window. The power systems don't follow any rules I know. It's like the ship thinks for itself. Lyra smiled, but Kyle noticed it was a sad smile. In many ways, it does think. My people build ships that are partners, not just tools. The ship and I work together. That's amazing, Kyle said. But how do you control it? I don't see any normal control, panels or computer systems. Control is not the right word, Lyra replied. I communicate with the ship. It feels my thoughts and emotions and responds to them. When I am happy, the ship flies smoothly. When I am troubled, it becomes harder to guide. Kyle looked at her, curiously. Is that why it's been acting strange lately? The power readings keep changing in ways that don't make sense. For a moment, Lyra's perfect features seemed to flicker, like a bad video signal. But when Kyle blinked, she looked normal, again. Perhaps the ship senses that I am far from home, she said quietly. Meanwhile, in the medical bay, Dr. Sandra Lopez was having her own puzzling experience. She had asked Lyra if she could run some basic medical scans, just to make sure their guest was healthy, and that the ship's environment was safe for her. The readings don't make any sense, Dr. Lopez muttered to herself as she looked at the scanner results. According to the equipment, Lyra had no heartbeat, no blood pressure, and no body temperature, but she was clearly alive and healthy. Is the something wrong, doctor? Lyra asked from the examination table. The scanners must be broken, Dr. Lopez said, trying to sound casual. They're not picking up your vital signs properly. Perhaps your machines are not designed to read my kind of life, Lyra suggested. Different species have different ways of existing. Dr. Lopez nodded, but she made a mental note to check the scanners later. Everything about Lyra seemed impossible, but she was clearly real and standing right there. That evening, Jake found himself on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. It was his favorite place to think, and he had a lot to think about lately. He was surprised when Lyra appeared beside him, moving so quietly he hadn't heard her approach. You come here often, she said. It wasn't a question. How do you know that? Jake asked. I can sense things about people. You have a peaceful feeling in this place. It helps you think clearly. Lyra stood beside him, also looking out at the stars. You have a good mind, Captain Morrison. Your crew trusts you because you make decisions with both your head and your heart. Jake felt a warm feeling at her words. Thank you. That means a lot, especially coming from someone who seems to understand people so well. I have had much time to observe different species, Lyra said, but humans are special. You have something that many others have lost. What's that? Hope and the courage to care about others, even when it might hurt you. Lyra turned to look at him, and in the starlight, her eyes seemed to glow softly. Most beings become careful and cold as they grow older, but humans keep their ability to feel deeply, even when it makes them vulnerable. Jake found himself moving closer to her. You sound like you speak from experience. How old are you, Lyra? For a long moment, she didn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was very quiet. Old enough to have seen civilizations rise and fall. Old enough to have watched species evolve and change. Old enough to know what loneliness really means. That sounds terrible, Jake said, feeling sorry for her. It has been difficult, Lyra admitted. I have been alone for so long that I had almost forgotten what it felt like to have someone care about my thoughts and dreams, not just my appearance. Jake reached out and gently touched her hand. Her skin was warm and soft, but there was something else. For just a second, he felt a strange tingling like electricity, but gentle and welcoming. You're not alone now, he said. Lyra looked at their joined hands, and Jake saw something in her expression that looked like pain mixed with hope. You are kind, Jake Morrison. Kinder than I deserve. Why would you say that? Because you see me as beautiful both inside and out. But there are things about me you don't know, things that might change how you feel. Jake squeezed her hand gently. Everyone has secrets, Lyra. What matters is who you choose to be, not what you were before. Lyra's eyes filled with something that looked like tears, though Jake wasn't sure if her species could actually cry. I hope you will remember those words, Captain. I truly hope you will. As they stood there together looking out at the infinite stars, Jake felt a connection to this mysterious being that went deeper than anything he had experienced before. He didn't know what secrets she was hiding, but he found that he didn't care. Whatever she was, whatever she had been, she was here now, and that was enough. A week had passed since Lyra arrived on the horizon. The crew had grown comfortable with her presence, and many considered her a friend. Jake found himself looking forward to their evening talks on the observation deck. There was something about her that made him feel peaceful and happy in a way he had never experienced before. It was during one of these quiet evenings that everything changed. Jake and Lyra were sitting together watching a distant nebula paint the stars in soft colors. They had been talking about Earth, about the places Jake had grown up and the dreams he had as a child. "You have such a beautiful world," Lyra said, softly. "Your oceans, your forests, your mountains, and the way your people create art and music, it fills me with wonder." Jake smiled at her. "I wish you could see it in person someday. Maybe when your ship is repaired, you could come with us back to Earth." Lyra's expression changed, becoming sad and distant. "That is a kind offer, Jake, but I don't think your people would welcome me if they knew what I really am." "What do you mean?" Jake asked, turning to face her fully. "Lyra, you're one of the most beautiful beings I've ever met, inside and out. Anyone would be lucky to know you." The moment he said the word beautiful, Lyra's face went completely still. She stared at him for a long moment, and Jake saw something like pain flash through her eyes. "Beautiful," she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. "You call me beautiful, human, but you haven't seen what I am beneath the shell." Before Jake could ask what she meant, Lyra stood up quickly and walked away, leaving him alone and confused. He called after her, but she didn't turn around. Something in her voice had frightened him, not of her, but for her. Jake tried to find Lyra the next day, but she had locked herself in her quarters. When he asked the computer to contact her, she politely refused to see anyone. Amy Chen reported that Lyra had missed their daily talks about human culture. Kyle Brooks said she hadn't come to check on her ship's repairs. "Something's wrong," Jake told Dr. Hayes during their morning briefing. "She's been avoiding everyone since yesterday evening." "Maybe she's just tired," suggested Lisa Grant. "She's been very social since she arrived. Perhaps she needs some time alone." But Jake knew it was more than that. He remembered the look in Lyra's eyes when she spoke those strange words about what lay beneath the shell. What had she meant? That night, Jake was awakened by alarms throughout the ship. He quickly dressed and ran to the bridge, where he found his night shift crew looking worried. "Captain, we're detecting massive energy fluctuations from Deck 7, reported the night communications officer. "It's coming from the guest quarters." "What kind of energy?" Jake asked, though he already suspected the answer. "The same type we detected from her ship, sir, but much stronger. The readings are off our scales." Jake felt his heart racing. "Security team to Deck 7. Medical team on standby." He paused, then added, "But no weapons unless I give the order." As Jake and his team rushed through the corridors, the lights flickered around them. The air itself seemed to vibrate with an energy that made everyone's skin tingle. When they reached Lyra's quarters, Jake could hear a strange humming sound coming from inside. "Lyra?" Jake called through the door. "Are you all right?" There was no answer, but the humming grew louder. Jake made a decision. Override the door. Locks. The door slid open and Jake stepped inside. What he saw made him stop breathing for a moment. Lyra was standing in the center of the room, but she looked different. Her perfect form was flickering like a broken hologram. Sometimes she appeared as the beautiful being they all knew, but sometimes her image would fade and show glimpses of something else underneath. "Lyra," Jake said, stepping toward her. "What's happening to you?" She turned to look at him, and her face was filled with pain and fear. "Jake, you shouldn't be here. Please go away." "I'm not leaving you like this," Jake said firmly. "Tell me, what's wrong? How can I help?" "You can't help," Lyra said, her voice breaking. "This is what I am, Jake. What you see as my beautiful form is not real. It's a projection, an image created by my mind to make other beings comfortable around me." Jake felt the world spinning around him. "A projection? But I touched you. You felt real." "The projection includes physical substance," Lyra explained, her form flickering more rapidly now. but it takes enormous energy to maintain. I've been weakening myself for days trying to keep up the appearance so you wouldn't be afraid of me." "Afraid of what?" Jake asked, though part of him wasn't sure he wanted to know. Lyra's beautiful face was filled with sadness. "My people. The Sherek learned long ago that our true appearance terrifies most other species. We developed the ability to project forms that others find pleasing, but the energy cost is huge and I can't maintain it much longer." The flickering was getting worse now. Jake could see glimpses of something large and dark behind Lyra's failing projection. "Show me," he said quietly. "No," Lyra said quickly. "Jake, please, I've grown to care for you and your crew. I don't want to lose the only friends I've had in centuries. If you see what I really am, you'll never look at me the same way again." "You're wrong," Jake said, stepping closer despite the strange energy crackling in the air around them. "Whatever you look like, you're still the same person I've been talking with every evening. You're still the being who understands art and music and human nature better than most humans do." "You don't understand," Lyra said, backing away from him. "My true form is nightmare fuel for species like yours. I am not the gentle, beautiful creature you think I am. I am something that would make your security chief reach for his weapons." The projection flickered one more time, and for just a second, Jake saw something that made his breath catch. Multiple eyes, tentacle-like appendages, and a form that seemed to exist in more dimensions than his mind could process. But even in that brief glimpse, he saw something else. He saw the same gentleness in those alien eyes, the same intelligence and kindness he had grown to know. "Lyra," he said softly, "I'm not afraid of you." But before he could say more, her projection stabilized with a burst of energy that sent him stumbling backward. Lyra's beautiful form returned, but Jake could see the effort was draining her. She was breathing heavily and her glow was much dimmer than before. "I have to leave," she said quietly. "My ship is nearly repaired. I'll go tonight before anyone else has to see what I really am." "You don't have to run," Jake said. "We can work through this together." Lyra looked at him with eyes full of ancient sadness. "You're kind, Jake Morrison. Kinder than I ever dared hope to find. But some truths are too terrible to share. Some shells are meant to never be cracked open." As she spoke, Jake could feel the ship's systems responding to her emotional distress. The lights dimmed, and he could hear her ship in the cargo bay powering up its engines. Whatever was happening to Lyra was affecting reality around her in ways he didn't understand. Jake realized that tomorrow might bring a choice he wasn't ready to make. But looking at this being who had brought so much wisdom and companionship to his crew, he knew one thing for certain. Beautiful or terrible, human-like or alien, Lyra was his friend. And he wasn't going to let her disappear into the darkness of space without a fight. Jake couldn't sleep that night. He kept thinking about what he had seen in Lyra's quarters, the brief glimpse of something vast and alien hiding behind her beautiful appearance. But more than that, he thought about the pain in her voice, the fear that she would lose the only friend she had known in centuries. Early the next morning, Jake made his decision. He gathered his senior staff in the conference room and told them everything. Dr. Hayes listened with scientific curiosity, while Amy Chen nodded with understanding. Tony Rodriguez looked worried and Kyle Brooks seemed confused. "So you're saying she's not really what she appears to be?" Tony asked. "Captain, this could be dangerous. We don't know what we're dealing with." "We're dealing with a person who's been alone for hundreds of years," Jake replied firmly. "Someone who's been so afraid of rejection that she's been hurting herself just to look the way she thinks we want her to look." Dr. Hayes spoke up from his position at the table. "The energy readings make sense now. If she's been projecting a false form this whole time, that would explain why our medical scanners couldn't read her properly, and why her ship's systems have been acting strangely. Her ship responds to her emotions," Kyle added. "If she's been stressed and afraid, that would affect how it operates." Amy Chen leaned forward. "Jake, what are you planning to do?" "I'm going to ask her to show us her true form," Jake said simply. The room went quiet. Tony shook his head. "Captain, that might not be wise. If her appearance is as terrible as she says, it could cause panic among the crew." Or it could show us that we're better than our first reactions, Jake replied. Amy, you've talked with her more than anyone except me. Do you think she's dangerous? Amy considered the question carefully. No. Everything about her personality suggests she's gentle and caring. She's shown more concern for our feelings than for her own safety. I think she's exactly who she appears to be on the inside. Jake nodded. That's what I think too. Dr. Hayes, Kyle, can you make sure her ship's systems are stable? If this goes badly, I don't want her emotional distress to damage either vessel. We'll monitor everything, Dr. Hayes promised. Jake stood up. Tony, I want you and your security team nearby, but weapons stay holstered unless I give a direct order. This isn't about protecting us from her. This is about protecting her from our own fear. An hour later, Jake stood outside Lyra's quarters again. He could hear that strange humming sound from inside, fainter than the night before but still there. When he pressed the door chime, the sound stopped. Lyra, it's Jake, we need to talk. The door opened after a long pause. Lyra stood there and Jake could see she looked tired. Her glow was dimmer and there were lines of strain around her eyes that hadn't been there before. I told you I would leave today, she said quietly. My ship is ready. You don't need to worry about me anymore. That's exactly why I'm here, Jake said, stepping into her quarters. I don't want you to leave, and I certainly don't want you to keep hurting yourself with this projection. Lyra backed away from him. Jake, please, you don't understand what you're asking. Then help me understand, Jake said. Show me who you really are. No, the word came out as almost a whisper. I can't lose you. I can't lose the friendship we've built. It's the most precious thing I've had in 300 years. Jake felt his heart break a little at the pain in her voice. Lyra, do you trust me? She looked at him with surprise. Of course I do. Then trust me now. Trust that friendship means more than appearance. Trust that humans can be better than our first instincts. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Jake could see the war going on behind Lyra's eyes. Hope fighting against centuries of loneliness and rejection. If I show you, she said finally, and you can't accept what you see, I'll leave immediately. No arguments, no second chances. Agreed, Jake said, though his heart was pounding. Lyra closed her eyes and took a deep breath. I'm sorry, Jake. I'm so sorry. The beautiful projection began to fade like morning mist. At first, Jake saw nothing but empty air where Lyra had been standing. Then slowly her true form began to appear. Jake's first reaction was shock so complete that he couldn't move or breathe. The being before him was massive, easily 8 feet tall and twice as wide. Her body was dark and seemed to shift and flow like liquid shadow. Dozens of tentacle-like appendages moved gently around her, each one as thick as Jake's arm. She had multiple rows of eyes, large and alien, but somehow still familiar. Her form seemed to exist partially in another dimension, making it hard for Jake's human mind to fully process what he was seeing. Behind him, Jake heard the door open as his security team rushed in. Tony Rodriguez made a sound of shock and his hand went to his weapon. Kyle Brooks stepped backward so quickly he hit the wall. Stay back, Tony shouted, drawing his gun. Captain, get away from that thing. But Jake didn't move. Yes, his first instinct had been fear. Yes, every human survival instinct was telling him to run. But as he looked at those alien eyes, he saw something that mattered more than fear. He saw the same gentle intelligence he had grown to know. He saw kindness and wisdom and terrible loneliness. Most importantly, he saw that she was trembling. This ancient, powerful being was shaking with fear. Not fear of him, but fear of losing him. Lower your weapon, Tony, Jake said quietly, never taking his eyes off Lyra. Captain, that's an order I can't follow, Tony replied, his gun still aimed at Lyra. Look at her eyes, Jake said. Really look at them. Do you see a monster, or do you see someone who's terrified of being rejected again? Dr. Hayes had entered the room and was staring at Lyra with scientific fascination rather than fear. Incredible, he breathed. Her form is perfectly adapted for her function. Those appendages can interface with multiple systems simultaneously. Her brain structure must be incredibly complex to process all that sensory input. Kyle, still pressed against the wall, spoke in a shaky voice. The ship systems. This is why her ship responds to her thoughts. She's built to interface with technology on a level we can't imagine. Lyra's voice came from her true form, still musical but deeper now. Please don't be afraid, I would never hurt any of you. Jake took a step toward her, and several of her appendages moved nervously. I'm not afraid, he said, and realized it was true. You're still you, Lyra. You're still the person who talks with Amy about art, who helps Kyle understand your ship, who sits with me and shares wisdom about the universe. But I'm hideous, Lyra said, her voice filled with shame. I'm everything humans have nightmares about. Multiple eyes, tentacles, a form that doesn't make sense to your three-dimensional minds. Jake reached out slowly and touched one of her appendages. It was warm and smooth, and he could feel a gentle pulse running through it like a heartbeat. You're different. You're alien. But you're not hideous. You're exactly what you were meant to be. Tony still had his weapon drawn, but his aim had wavered. Captain, are you sure about this? Jake looked back at his security chief. Tony, has she ever given us any reason to fear her? Has she done anything but try to be helpful and kind? Tony lowered his weapon slowly. No, sir. She hasn't. Dr. Hayes stepped closer, his scientific curiosity overcoming his initial shock. Lyra, your true form is actually quite beautiful in its own way. You're a perfect example of form following function. Everything about you is designed for exploration and understanding. But Lyra was already beginning to back away, her form starting to shimmer as she prepared to project her human appearance again. You're all being kind, but I can see the fear in your faces. I can hear it in your voices. This is why I hide. This is why I stay alone. Wait, Jake said urgently. Don't hide again, please. But it was too late. Energy crackled around Lyra as her projection began to reform. The strain was visible, her true form wavering as she fought to maintain the illusion. Jake realized that forcing herself back into the projection so quickly after dropping it was causing her enormous pain. Around them, the ship's lights began to flicker, and they could hear her vessel in the cargo bay powering up its engines. Lyra's emotional turmoil was affecting reality itself, warping the space around them in ways Jake didn't understand. She's preparing to leave, Dr. Hayes said urgently. Captain, her distress is affecting both ships. If she goes through with this departure while she's in this emotional state, it could tear a hole in space-time. Jake realized they had reached the critical moment. Everything depended on what happened next. The ship shook as energy waves pulsed through the corridors. Jake could feel the deck vibrating under his feet as Lyra's emotional distress affected both vessels. Her beautiful projection flickered in and out of existence, and each time it failed, Jake caught glimpses of her true form underneath. Lyra, stop, Jake said urgently. You're hurting yourself. I have to maintain the projection, she replied, her voice strained with effort. I can't let you see me as I really am, not after the fear I saw in your faces. Jake looked around the room at his crew. Tony still looked shaken, his hand resting on his weapon, though it remained holstered. Kyle was pressed against the wall, clearly uncomfortable. Even Dr. Hayes, despite his scientific interest, showed signs of unease. But Jake realized something important. The fear he had seen wasn't fear of Lyra herself. It was fear of the unknown, fear of something different, and that was something humans could overcome. Everyone out, Jake ordered suddenly. Captain? Tony questioned. I said everyone out. Now. Jake's voice carried the authority of command, and his crew reluctantly filed out of the room. Tony, seal the door. Don't let anyone in unless I call for help. Once they were alone, Jake turned back to Lyra. Her projection was failing more rapidly now, and he could see the pain it was causing her. Let it go, he said gently. Stop the projection. I can't, Lyra whispered. If you see me again, really see me, you'll understand why I've been alone for so long. Jake walked closer to her flickering form. Lyra, I need you to listen to me. Earlier, when I first saw your true appearance, yes, I was shocked. But do you know what I was thinking after that first moment? She shook her head, not trusting herself to speak. I was thinking that you looked like you were in pain. I was thinking that you seemed afraid. I was thinking that I wanted to help you, not run from you. Jake reached out toward her wavering projection. I wasn't afraid of you, Lyra. I was afraid for you. The projection flickered one more time and then collapsed entirely. Lyra's true form stood before Jake in all its alien majesty, 8 feet tall, with tentacles moving gently in patterns that seemed almost like breathing. Multiple eyes that held depths of knowledge and sadness. A form that existed in dimensions Jake's mind could barely comprehend. But this time, Jake didn't step back. Instead, he moved closer. You're incredible, he said softly. Lyra's tentacles stopped moving. What? Look at yourself, really look. You're not a monster, Lyra. You're a being perfectly designed for understanding the universe. Those appendages can touch and learn from dozens of things at once. Your eyes can see in ways humans never could. Your mind can process information that would overwhelm our brains. Jake reached out and gently touched one of her tentacles again. You're not hideous. You're amazing. But I'm so different from you, Lyra said, her voice filled with centuries of pain. How can you not be afraid? Jake smiled. Because different doesn't mean bad. It just means different. Lyra, you've spent the last week showing me and my crew what it means to be wise, kind, and caring. Your appearance doesn't change any of that. One of Lyra's eyes moved to focus on him more directly. You really mean that? I do. And I think the rest of my crew will understand too, once they get past their first surprise. Jake paused. Can I ask you something? Anything. Why do you call your appearance a shell? You said I hadn't seen what you were beneath the shell. Lyra was quiet for a long moment. Then several of her tentacles moved in what Jake somehow understood was a gesture of sadness. For so long I've thought of my true form as something to be hidden, something shameful. The projection became who I thought I should be, and my real body became just a shell containing my true self. But you're right. This form, this body, this is who I really am. And who you are is wonderful, Jake said firmly. At that moment, the door chimed. Jake heard Tony's voice through the comm system. Captain, Dr. Hayes wants to speak with you. He says it's important. Come in, Jake called. The door opened and Dr. Hayes entered, followed by the rest of Jake's senior staff. Jake was pleased to see that while they still looked nervous, none of them reached for weapons or backed away. Dr. Hayes stepped forward, addressing Lyra directly. I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about hiding because other species fear your appearance. I believe you've made an error in your reasoning. Lyra's tentacles moved nervously. What do you mean? You've been assuming that fear equals rejection, Dr. Hayes explained. But fear is often just the first reaction to something new and unknown. Humans are very good at moving past that first reaction when we take time to think and understand, Amy. Chen nodded in agreement. Lyra, you've been one of the kindest, most insightful people I've ever met. Learning that you look different doesn't change any of the conversations we've had or the friendship we've built. Kyle Brooks, still looking uncomfortable but determined, spoke up. Your ship technology makes so much more sense now. You're not just using it. You're connected to it in a way humans never could be. That's not frightening. That's incredible. Even Tony Rodriguez stepped forward. Ma'am, I apologize for drawing my weapon. My job is to protect this crew, and my first instinct was to treat you as a threat. But you've never been a threat to us. You've been a friend. Lyra's form seemed to relax, her tentacles moving in slower, more peaceful patterns. You all truly mean this? You can accept me as I am? We already have, Jake said simply. Lyra, you are exactly who you've always been. Beautiful, wise, kind, and caring. The fact that you look different from us doesn't change any of that. But what about the rest of your species? Lyra asked. What about when we reach Earth? Will they be able to accept me? Jake considered this seriously. Some will immediately. Others will need time to understand, just like we did. But I believe humans have something special. something that makes us different from the other species you've encountered. What's that? We have the ability to see past our first reactions. We can learn and grow and change our minds. And once we understand that someone is good and kind, we tend to protect them even if they're different from us. Dr. Hayes added, Lyra, I believe your species made a mistake generations ago. By hiding your true forms, you never gave other species the chance to learn and accept you. You assumed rejection before it happened. Perhaps, Lyra said thoughtfully, but the Shrek have been alone for so long we forgot how to trust. You don't have to be alone anymore, Jake said. Stay with us. Let us show you that friendship is stronger than fear, that understanding is more powerful than first impressions. Lyra looked around the room at each of the humans. In their faces, she saw something she hadn't experienced in centuries. Not just acceptance, but genuine care and friendship. I would like that very much, she said finally. Over the following days, the crew of the Horizon adjusted to Lyra's true appearance. Some crew members took longer than others to feel comfortable, but none of them treated her with anything less than respect and kindness. Children on the ship, with the fearlessness of youth, often asked her questions about her tentacles and eyes with simple curiosity rather than fear. Jake continued his evening talks with Lyra on the observation deck and found that their conversations became even more meaningful now that she was no longer hiding who she truly was. Her insights into the universe, her understanding of different species and cultures, became invaluable to the ship's mission. When they eventually reached Earth, Lyra's presence caused quite a stir, but Jake had been right about humanity's capacity for growth. While some people were frightened at first, most quickly came to understand that this being was a friend and teacher, not a threat. Lyra became Earth's first alien ambassador, helping humanity understand their place in a larger galactic community. Years later, Jake would often think about that moment when Lyra first revealed her true form. He realized that it hadn't been a test of whether humans could accept the alien and different. It had been a test of whether they could see past the surface to the soul beneath. And in passing that test, humanity had taken its first real step toward joining the greater community of intelligent life in the galaxy. Lyra never again felt the need to hide behind a projection. She had finally found beings who could see her for who she truly was and love her not despite her differences, but because of all that made her unique. She had found her home among the humans, and they had found a teacher and friend who would help guide them to the stars.